I hope I strike a balance. I read the first draft and I realized that it sounded like an Ice Age survival manual. So I edited about a third of it out to make the story what it was intended to be, a story. I don't want people to get bogged down in the little details about what survival would have been like at that time. Some people might be interested. Once in a while, somebody will lend me a romance novel or something, and I'm reading it and it's like, oh dear, oh my, talking about, every detail of this woman's outfit and her purse matches her shoes. And I'm like, I don't care. And I'm people are reading all these details about Ice Age survival in the same way. Well, I don't care. Just tell me what happens next.
Yeah, that's always the trouble, right? All right, welcome back, everyone, to another episode of the I Didn't Read Your Book podcast. I am your host, Lutch, and today we are going to be talking with E.A. Meigs about The Dreamer, the beginning. So from the cover, it does say on the cover, just before dawn, on a cold spring morning, a young Neanderthal man awakens from a strange and frightening dream that will change his life forever. So based on what I'm seeing, the landscape, talking about Neanderthals, even the typeface is giving me a very prehistoric type of vibe. You got the animals out in the range here, but talking about waking up from a strange dream gives me the impression that there's a little bit more of a narrative and a story rather than just talking about time periods and such. A young Neanderthal man awakens from a strange and frightening dream that will change his life forever. I wonder if this has to, the dreamer, I wonder if this has to do with like the change from like the caveman thing to the current Homo sapien version of us. That would be interesting. Maybe it's a story about how this Neanderthal guy has this dream and is just different in some way than everybody else. And eventually it turns out that he is the first home. I don't know, something like that. I think it doesn't, the issue I have with it, if that is the case, it doesn't really have, I would want to see a character, some type of indication that this almost looks like a nonfiction book or something. I can't put my finger on it, but for somebody who I don't know that I would necessarily pick this up and read the back of this book because of that. And I'm only realizing that would be the case now that I am looking at it and seeing that there is no person on it. But even with this little blurb about the man having a dream, it makes me think of maybe the time period and the setting is a bigger part of the story than the actual characters, if there are any. And I don't know personally if that would be something. I just don't know what that is, so I don't know that would necessarily interest me. But we all know how wrong we can be. So without further ado, let's dive right in and read the back of the book. The Dreamer, the Beginning. This is the first in a series of novels that follows the life of Tris, the dreamer, his father, Tor, and their last friend and neighbor, Black Wolf. At the time of Earth's last great glacial period, Europe was inhabited by at least two peoples, the Neanderthals and the Cro-Magnon. Although this primitive world was filled with a harsh and stunning beauty, it was also a brutally difficult period in mankind's history. Humans struggled to survive against the dangers posed by an inhospitable climate and their perilous position within nature's food chain. Amidst this backdrop, a young Neanderthal man of the Old Ones clan, Tris, discovers that he is a dreamer. a horrific vision shatters his sleep when he sees that a ferocious animal has attacked his father and uncle, who are on a journey to open the tundra, on a journey to the open tundra in pursuit of fresh meat. Triss enlists their Cro-Magnon neighbor, the giant Black Wolf. Black Wolf is his name, and he is giant, or he is a giant. It says the lowercase giant, uppercase Black Wolf. So I don't know if he is a giant or he is just like big and he's saying he's giant. But the giant Black Wolf, to embark on a trek to the grasslands to search for his pa and uncle. Pa, I guess like pa. Triss's relationship with Black Wolf is complicated by the fact that he is in love with Black Wolf's daughter, Morningstar. But Triss dares not act on his feelings because he does not believe that Morningstar and her family will be receptive to his affections for her. While Triss and Black Wolf make their way across a wild landscape, his dreams continue, each one hinting at the fate that has befallen his pa and uncle. As the story unfolds, Triss's dreams figure prominently, but is really an ongoing adventure that revolves around family, friendship, love, social conflict, and endurance against the odds. So that gives us a little bit clearer of a picture and a little bit more indication that this is narrative based. This is not, while, you know, the setting clearly is a big part of what's going on here. It's not necessarily, you know, it's a story like any other to that extent, where you have your main characters, you have your love interest, you have your you know, your journey. It seems like the typical hero's journey, yeah, I see. I saw that this was one in a number of series. So there is a number of other books. So I'm thinking now that maybe it is more of an epic, where this journey is the main story, but in each book there is a specific story within that journey that's you know, part of that book. So probably not about you know, becoming Homo sapiens or anything like that, but we have got the author waiting. So without further ado, let's bring in EA Meigs. All right, and there she is. So it's EA Meigs?
Yes, it is.
Welcome. How are you doing today?
I'm fine, thanks. How are you?
Very good, thanks.
Wonderful.
So we have just finished reading the back of the beginning of the Dreamer. And so when I first saw the cover, my first thought was with the little the blurb on the bottom talking about a Neanderthal having a dream that was going to shake things up. I was thinking, okay, maybe this is something to do with, you know, the evolution of man and like the first man, and like maybe it's some caveman and wakes up and he has this new level of understanding, and he's trying to navigate that. And so read the back of the book, and it sounds like that's not anything close to what the book is. But the other thing was that I wasn't sure how much of the story was going to be based on the setting and the time versus the characters. But again, once reading the back of the book, you gave a very good picture of the fact that this is, you know, a not, I don't want to say typical, but a more or less standard type of narrative with your protagonists and, you know, the love interest and the journey and all of that kind of stuff. And so I guess my first question would be just how interested would you have to be in this time period to really sink your teeth into the story?
I'm not sure you need a special interest in the time period. I think if you're interested in historical fiction, paleo fiction, natural history that, or paleoanthropology that you would be perhaps maybe a tad more interested. But really, people are people. You know, what people have gone through throughout the eons doesn't really change a whole lot. Our priorities, you know, survival and keeping our families going and everything, you know, that's been paramount since day one.
So we've got our main character is Tris. He's the one that
Yes.
has this this dream, right?
Yes.
And so can you tell us what the dream is about? Is that a spoiler?
It's not a spoiler. The initial dream is he doesn't quite know what he's experiencing, but he just has this extraordinarily vivid dream that he's part of a scene where an animal just explodes out of the brush, and he doesn't know what it means, but he has a sense that something important is about to happen.
So a little bit like a premonition.
Yes.
Is that connected to his eventual journey? We were reading about Pa and his uncle, I think it was. Is that for like his father? Is that
Pa's his father, and his uncle is out hunting with his father at the time that the dream takes place, and he has a sense that this dream involves them. And like I say, he's not quite sure why. He's a little bit confused, and he just has this very strong sense of urgency that he has to do something to help them. And so he goes to his father's best friend, Black Wolf, who is one of the Cro-Magnon, and this takes place in France. So it is literally the Cro-Magnon people who were discovered in France at that time. And they go out on this journey together to see what's happened.
France? That's interesting. So you've definitely done, I would imagine, a lot of homework in this area to be historically accurate. Is this something that you have been interested in before writing this, or is writing this a byproduct of being interested in this type of paleo history that you're talking about?
I've done actually a lot of research since I first started writing the books in 2015, because it's an ongoing saga. I'm working on book 7 right now, and I think there's going to be 9 in the series before it's done. But, you know, throughout the years, from the time I started, I've done a lot of research. I've taken university courses. But up until this time, I mean, when I was a kid, my after-school job was at a museum of natural history. I worked there for 4 years, and I worked with some people who are now fairly well-known naturalists who were just getting their start in the business back then. And it was just really influential to me. I love nature anyways. My dad was a real outdoorsman, so I was sort of brought up, you know, walking out in the woods with him. Some of my earliest memories of being a preschooler, even, you know, walking out in the woods with my dad and having him show me things and teach me things. And I was always a avid camper. I was always making up some kind of tent and taking it out in the woods. And I mean, tent, I mean, a plastic sheet or something. It was not a real tent with an old bathroom rug or something, a bath mat that I could lay down on. So that was just sort of who I was, what I enjoyed anyways. And I wasn't the typical kid who read typical kid literature. I was always reading books that revolved around the outdoors, particularly a lot of Jack London. You know, who wrote Call of the Wild and, you know, that genre. So, you know, it's something I've always been interested in. I've always been interested in science and history. And I've always been an avid reader. We didn't have television when I was growing up because of where we lived. There was just no reception and you could have a TV, but you're not going to see a whole lot on it. So I was a reader, and yeah, so I was always reading about science, and I was always interested in the history of the earth.
Sure.
And
Really,
I
you
didn't have a
really,
particular interest in the Neanderthal till, I don't know, quite some time ago, when they first analyzed Neanderthal DNA. I was reading, I think it was a National Geographic article, and I was kind of surprised to read that at that time, and this is only based on one individual, they discovered that this individual, they think, was red-haired because they had the genetic signature for somebody with reddish hair, light-colored eyes, pale, possibly freckled skin, and gave a general description of their size based on their fossilized remains and all that. And I was like, oh wow, this is just not at all what I imagined. I had heard about the Neanderthal, but I really didn't know anything about them. You see the pictures that came out soon after the discovery where they really look pretty ape-like, and come to find out that, really they weren't. They were people, they were just people. And come to find out that they had the largest brains of any known humans. So, they weren't just these ape-like dumb brutes. They were smart people. And the more we find out about them, that, that they were actually making 3-ply twine, and just finding that one fragment of twine opens up a world of possibilities. They could be making rope, they could be making nets. They could be knitting sweaters for all we know. We don't really know. But
yeah, even if that was, even if that
technology.
yeah, even if that was the Einstein of the Neanderthals, that's still evidence of a certain level of intelligence, and I guess you would say technology even.
Yeah, absolutely. They were, actually manufacturing substances as well. We know that they were creating pine and birch tars and distilling the oils, and that's pretty advanced technology. It would take me a bit to figure out how to distill birch tars and oils. That's not easy stuff. And
yeah, there was an article about a guy who I don't know, he had some political cause behind it, but the point of his thing was he wanted to make a toaster from scratch, and something that you could buy at Walmart for $10, and what it would entail, not just financially, but just all around, in order to build something that we take for granted as such a basic human amenity. And he could not do it. There was something about the either plastics or some kind of metal or something, and it was something that even a modern day human, even though that's not even though the Neanderthals weren't using toasters, toasters
primitive
aren't
toasters toasting right over the fire.
Right, but they that was not the peak of their or rather, that's not the peak of our technology, and even still an average human can't these days can't put it together. So it really does, even just as you were saying, the fact that twine exists really does say a lot. I'm wondering, can you talk a little bit about the differences between these categories, like the Neanderthal and Cro-Magnon? How does that fit into like the Homo erectus versus Homo sapien? Are these different categories? Are they umbrella categories that this falls under that? How does all that work? So sorry to interrupt your podcast experience. I just want to remind you, if you're enjoying what you're watching, please hit the like button and subscribe for more content. And if you really love it, there's some support links in the description. I would love if you could help out the channel. And back to the show.
I'm not sure I'm the person to answer that question. but
So what's the difference between a Neanderthal and a Cro-Magnon?
the Cro-Magnon were probably descendants of people who were eventually working their way out of Africa.
Okay.
The original tribes who
Mhm.
piecemeal were, probably following game or just looking for better resources, or maybe just looking for new lands to open up because it was getting crowded where they were, who knows. Maybe their homeland habitat was drying up because we're talking over such a vast period of time, and various parts of the world experience droughts for a few years and then they get wet again. Was it a drought and they left because they couldn't wait? One of the things you have to live is water. And when the water dries up, so the animals and everything move off too, so you kind of are forced to go where you can make a living. So, these are all just guesses. There's so much that we don't really know. It's so far back in history that we can only make educated guesses. But
Right.
the Cro-Magnon probably never lived in Africa or anywhere near Africa, but they were probably descendants of people who were working their way out of Africa. That's my take.
Gotcha. And so so would a Neanderthal be considered a different species, or is it just a different grouping of the same species?
This is strictly my opinion because there's no agreement on this,
Gotcha.
even amongst scientists.
So science isn't settled.
No, not by a long shot. But my opinion is that the Neanderthal were human. We interbred with them. Almost everybody on the planet, they're finding out, even Africans, because of people who had eons ago left Africa. Their descendants eventually filtered back into Africa. And so, with the back breeding, even people and everybody pretty much has Neanderthal DNA in them now. In fact, I've heard a paleoanthropologist say that genetically, the Neanderthal are much more successful now than they ever were when they were a distinct people on the planet, because their genes have spread so far.
Yeah, I guess that's one way to look at it.
Yeah.
So with all of this, with all of this, not archaeological. What was the word you used? Anthropology. There you go. That's the one I was looking for. I knew it was an aologist something.
Yes.
With all this anthropology, being injected into the story, how do you balance, bringing that in, having that be a factor of, building the world, without detracting from the story from somebody who, as you mentioned in the beginning, that you don't necessarily have to have an affinity for that type of science in order to enjoy this story. But it sounds like you know a lot about this stuff, and that you, again, the building of the world in the setting itself requires talking a lot about this. So how do you strike that balance?
I hope I strike a balance. When I wrote the first draft of the first book, I went back and read the first draft, and I realized that it sounded like an Ice Age survival manual. So I went back and edited about a third of it out to make the story what it was intended to be, a story. I don't want people to get bogged down in little details about what survival would have been like at that time. Some people, who were enthused about that kind of thing might be interested, but I just think of myself, as I mentioned before, most of my reading tends to be kind of scientific and maybe a little dry for a lot of people, but once in a while somebody will lend me, say, a romance novel or something, and I'm reading it and it's like, oh dear, oh my, talking about, every detail of this woman's outfit and her purse matches her shoes. And I'm like, I don't care. And I'm people reading all these details about Ice Age survival in the same way. Well, I don't care. Just tell me what
That's
happens next.
yeah, that's always the trouble, right?
Yes.
I guess that's really not necessarily a specific question to this type of setting, but really any type of story.
Right, right. You want it to, if it's the story as opposed to any kind of a scientific work, you want it to be a story, you want it to flow, you want it to engage the reader. So by cutting out that third of of fairly technical stuff, I hoped I made the story flow well and keep the reader reading, but include enough detail to make it seem realistic.
Mhm.
That's
I can
my
definitely
aim.
I could definitely relate to that because I could be I'm one to ramble, and like if I was, let's say, writing a story about a UFC fighter. I'm a big UFC fan, and
Yes.
they actually just came out with Halle Berry just did a movie where she plays an MMA fighter, and she's coming up through the ranks, and she wants to make it to the big leagues and everything. And the UFC actually had a big part to do with it, and some of the fighters are in the movie. And Halle Berry's been at the actual UFC events lately and stuff, and so they're promoting it. And so when I watched it, I thought that it wasn't a bad movie, and by any stretch of the imagination, but it didn't have as much insider stuff about MMA that I would have expected. I kind of thought there would be a little bit more about maybe maybe the training aspects,
Uh,
or like the internal politics. A lot of people who aren't big fans of specifically the UFC, but mixed martial arts in general. There's a lot of drama and stuff that goes on between fights, and it being sports entertainment. It's whereas pro wrestling is heavy on the entertainment side, to the point where it's sporty, but it's not a sport in the sense that it's all scripted.
right.
MMA is it's in a very similar lane, but at the end of the day, the fights are real, and so, but there's not necessarily like playoffs like there would be football or something. So you've got to sell a character, you've got to sell a story, and so
Right.
I've heard it been be called just a soap opera for dudes. That's the UFC, and yeah, I definitely again, the Halle Berry movie Bruised, it was a good movie, but I would have written that story to be a lot more technical, and probably somebody who'd been like, dude, nobody cares about this stuff. Nobody cares about which gloves they used and why they were talking about this glove over that, the intimate
Right,
details.
right. Well, that's where the copy editor comes in, because boy, I couldn't do this without my copy editor. Not only does she correct my manuscript, but she also gives me helpful asides to tell me that I need to explain a little more about this, or that's generally
Or a
where
little
she
less.
comes in. No, she actually tells me when I need to explain a little more, because after learning my lesson and having to take out a third of a whole book, now I try to be fairly economical with
Gotcha.
the amount of primitive technology that I include. But there are sometimes, because of my background, that things that have just been gathering dust in my brain for decades. I assume everybody knows, and she'll point out to me, you might need to add a paragraph or something
I
explaining this
can
a little more.
And now that you
So,
say that, again, comparing it to that hypothetical UFC story, I could totally see that exact thing. I'd go on for 10 pages about something that nobody cares about, and then casually mention something that actually needs an explanation, and think that
right,
everybody
right.
knows it.
Yes, yes,
Oh, that
yes. The
must be
copy
frustrating.
editors are definitely worth their weight in gold. I know mine sure is.
What that a fresh set of eyes can do.
Yes, absolutely. Yes.
Interesting. So you have how many do you have written already? How many books do you have written already?
I have 6 books in the adult series out, and this year I started a companion series for children featuring the
nice.
oldest son of the main character.
Oh, cool.
So I've
And
got
so
one
this,
children's
so
book
the,
out.
so the story of Tris looking for his father and uncle, based off the dream, is that more of the story of this book, or is that more of the story of the overall series?
It's the story of that book, but it also sets the scene for the series, because when the series starts in this first book, he's just a young man. You know, he's still finding his way in the world, and as the series goes on, he matures, and his adventures just open up. You know, that's when the series really gets going in the subsequent books.
And so the overall, people who are writing a series of books, will have different, varying levels of how much connection there is. Whether one book is just a continuation of the where the last book left off, or if there's a lot that's planted early on in earlier books that pays off later in later parts of the story in later books. How much do you try to embed, like planting seeds, so that later things can pay off, and how far do you go with that? Do you try to plant things in earlier books, or do you try to kind of resolve and tie things up at the end of each book?
A bit of both. When I first started writing the book, it was back in February 2015, just all of a sudden one day I woke up with this story in my head. And as a lifelong compulsive writer, this is the way it always happens for me. A story will just appear out of nowhere, and I have to write it. And I just have no idea where it comes from, but I have to write it. I have no choice. So I started writing, thinking it would be one book, because the series is one continuous story. But as I'm writing the first book, I'm realizing I'm not going to get this in one book. And so I split it up, and I wasn't quite sure how many books it would take to get the whole story that was in my head out. But right now it's looking like 9. So each book contains, probably a few seeds of, relating to things that happen further on in the story in future volumes. But it's mostly just because it's, one continuous story. It's not meant really to be teasers. It's just, mentioning
Right.
things.
And so that following Tris is what we do throughout the series, him and Black Wolf on this journey looking for them. That's the arc
That's
of
the
the.
beginning.
Okay. And so
Yes.
what else do they go on to do? I mean, unless it's of course a big spoiler, do they find do they succeed in saving Pa and Uncle on in this book? Is that something that comes later, or how do
It does get resolved before the end of the book. I will say that much. I won't say how it gets resolved, but it does get
fair
resolved.
enough.
But it's actually written as a narrative. I wanted the readers to really be able to engage with Tris, especially since they I felt to write it any other way wouldn't help them understand who he was as a person, who he was as a man, as opposed to just writing in general, as most books, I believe, have the omnipresent point of view. And that kind of, at least in my mind, that kind of would make you feel somewhat separated from him. He's a Neanderthal, he's not one of us. But I thought that by putting the reader in his head, as he narrates his own story and tells things from his perspective, and that would just give the readers a lot more insight to who he was and what his world was like and what he was experiencing. And, I didn't attempt to make him, like a Ooga Booga caveman or anything. He's just a person. And
So how the fact that he is the narrator and we're seeing it from his eyes, how would that how do you sorry, new mic arm, so I'm getting used to the
that's
placement.
okay.
The fact that it's from his point of view, how would that have changed the way that readers are consuming the story, as if you were that omnipresent narrator, as if you were telling Triss's story?
I hope that they just enjoy it from his point of view. He has sort of a droll sense of humor. And as one newspaper article mentioned, that they liked the thoughtful way he navigated his world.
But I mean, so like you would be able, obviously having written that, you would be able to have that same type of what's the word, that same type of personality as a narrator. But with Triss being this, not being a modern human, and us reading about his experience, so I'm thinking, if we had a modern day omnipresent narrator, we might be able to hear about Triss's story, and then the narrator could relate things to the us as the reader, as a modern day human. Whereas obviously, not only Triss can't do that, but there's a lot of things that Triss wouldn't know to do.
Right.
Similarly to how the things that you were talking about with your copy editor, where you just know certain things about these areas where other people may not. And so it either might be that that exact thing where Triss is maybe hunting and there's a specific way of doing it, and he wouldn't necessarily think to narrate it in such a way that you would have to explain it to people who have never hunted before, because everybody he knows would be have that familiarity with the idea of hunting. And so I'm just wondering if the choice to have Triss be the narrator was a conscious one, in that sense, where I guess it could be more immersive, not having that modern day buffer. You know what I mean?
Well, I hope it's more immersive. I can't really say for sure what the readers take away from it. I do get emails and messages from readers, and I'm always really glad to get their feedback and to get their takeaways. And sometimes I'm really surprised. I had one reader tell me that he enjoyed the paleofiction genre, but he said he'd ordered some books off of Amazon, and he was really kind of disappointed to find out that he's reading these novels, and he says there's just so many toxic men. He said, thank you for not having toxic male characters. That was something that wasn't even on my radar, but you just never know what kind of feedback you're going to get. And getting feedback from men who are telling me that they really relate to him, and and having to provide for their families, and I'm glad he's a relatable character. And then I get other feedback from women who say they love Triss, and it's like, well, I'm glad they like him too.
That's always good. Yeah, this
Yes.
was certainly a little bit before the Me Too era, right?
Right.
Interesting. And so the with so many books, I have to imagine the cast of characters probably builds, and you probably have quite a list of people who come up on Triss's journey.
There is a list, but the three main characters, Triss and his father and Black Wolf, they're the three constants. Other characters kind of come and go. I make an effort not to have too many characters for people to, sort of juggle around in their brain while they're trying to read the series. But, at that time in history, this taking place in Europe, there weren't a whole lot of people in Europe back then. So it's not like it's going to be, a drama where there's a cast of thousands, because there just weren't that many people around in Europe at that time.
And so what time exactly are we talking about?
We're talking about approximately 40,000 years ago.
And so I'm just trying to think what major geological differences are they experiencing that from what we have today?
Well, it takes place during an ice age. So
that's probably pretty different.
Europe would have been somewhat colder than it is now. It wasn't at the peak of the ice age, but it was still a very cold period in history.
And so then I'm wondering if, my first question was, do you have to have an affinity for this stuff to really get the full effect of the story? And now I'm wondering, is this a good entry point for maybe somebody who maybe doesn't know a lot about this stuff but wants to start learning about it?
It could be an entry point. I do include an introduction to each book that gives the basics for the time period and for the people who were living in Eurasia during that time period. So, there is a brief rundown, just a couple of pages before you start the story. And at the end of each book, there's an Ice Age animal index that has illustrated just brief blurbs about animals that people perhaps wouldn't be well acquainted with. Excuse me, the woolly mammoth and woolly rhino and cave lions and all that.
So how long, you said 2015 you wrote the first one?
The first one, yes.
And wow, it's what kind of what kind of audience has been taking to this?
I would say the audience is surprisingly broad. I thought it might appeal mostly to people who were interested in paleo fiction, but I've also had some readers write to me who tell me, that this isn't the usual type of book that they read, but that they've become really engaged with the series. So, it's always wonderful to hear.
Did you publish these independently, or did you go through a publisher?
I actually attempted to find an agent who would help me place the first book with a publisher. I wrote to 72 agents. Wow. I think 6 responded. And the 6 who responded, there was 1 or 2 who said that they didn't think enough interesting things happened in that point of time, and they weren't interested. And a few others.
How would they know?
Oh, you're only limited by your imagination in my mind.
Yeah.
But a few others said that based on what I had sent them, that they several specifically mentioned the world building and the characters, that they really liked that. They said that they liked the premise, but they had nowhere to place it, because publishers very often have publishing slots, so many bios, so many romance novels, so many sci-fi, and they had nobody to place a paleo fiction
how to
novel
market it
with. Right. So, you know, and a couple others were just polite, no thank yous. But so after, you know, trying to do it the traditional route, which definitely would have been my preference, because I'm a writer. I love writing. And thanks to more recent work history, working as a managing editor and that sort of thing, and working for a small publisher, I knew how to actually design and make a book and publish a book, but that's not really what I want to do. And as I often say, I'm terrible at advertising. I'm terrible at self-promotion. That's just not what I do. I mean, I have to get the word out somehow, because people can't read what they don't know about. But you know, I just wanted to write the books. I wanted someone else to do all the other stuff. And
I hear you.
being that I couldn't find someone else to do all the other stuff, well, I'll just create a small publishing house and do it myself, and say it's not my first choice, but I'm doing it. And so that's why I established Dreamer Literary Productions. And yeah, so I've been putting out a book a year since 2016.
Good. Yeah, I definitely relate to that, because I would love for podcasting to just be, you know, this is all set up. I could just come and sit down, talk, and then send it off and let somebody else deal with the editing and all that. I mean, you know, if you have the money, it works like that, but I don't quite have the money just yet.
Right.
So check those support links in the description below if you'd like to donate. And yeah, so the, you know, it shows a level of passion that, you know, if you not only, you know, reaching out to so many people, but also just when that doesn't work, to decide, okay, you know, I'm going to go do this on my own. That, you know, this is something that you know, not many people, or I don't know if I could say not many people, but many people wouldn't be willing to do that. And it's a testament to the fact that not only, again, is this something that you are clearly passionate about, but that if, you know, it's been going for 5 years now, and
Going
6
on
years
7
now?
years.
Almost 7 years now, and
Yeah.
people are still buying the books and still contacting you, and especially if you're getting into new areas, you know, not necessarily just the paleo crowd, the anthropology crowd, but people who wouldn't necessarily think to read something like this, but are actually doing so and enjoying it. That's all you could really ask for, right? Because once they're in, then there's a lot less selling that you have to do for the rest of the series.
At least for that particular
For those
reader,
people,
generally,
yeah.
yes. Most of the people who buy the first book go through the whole series. You know, they stay a steady customer, and I am very grateful for that. And I even have some who contact me, when's the next one coming out?
So what's one message that you got from a reader that has stuck with you?
Well, I think they all stick with me to some degree. But I'm not sure if there's any. Well, I guess the one that was the most gratifying was the reader who told me that the characters had become like members of her family.
That's quite a statement.
Yeah, that is quite a statement. I was deeply honored to read that.
And I would certainly, obviously, I haven't read the books, but I would imagine that it would have to be well written for somebody to be that deeply engaged with them.
Well, I hope so. All I can say is, you know, I do my best, and as a compulsive writer, I don't even feel like I'm the one who's in control once the story appears in my brain. It's like it takes on a life of its own, and all I'm doing is recording it. You know, it's
the muse from the creative universe.
I guess, yeah.
Awesome. Well, I can't think of a better ending note than that. I definitely, this is a very interesting niche of content of topic. I can't say that I would have ever imagined that this specific thing would be something, a setting that you could use to tell. Again, I'm not sure the right word. I know typical is not the right word, but a more standard type of narrative. That's really cool because you usually when it comes to like stuff that I'll watch on TV, I'm much more likely to watch something that is just set in the present because that is less time that needs to be, there's less stuff that needs to be explained. We could just jump into what's going on. I get, the setting. Like you tell me if it's in Philadelphia or LA or New York, like in present day, like, okay, I know what's going on. I know the context
Right.
and all of that
Yeah.
stuff. And there are when you get into either fantasy stuff or historical pieces, there's more time that has to be dedicated to building the setting, and sometimes people don't always strike that balance. So it sounds like if people are not only enjoying the first book but going through the whole series, that you are indeed striking that balance.
I
So
hope so.
uh, if there is anything you want to plug, the other books, websites, social media, anything like that, the floor is yours.
Um, well, you can find all my social media. You can find a blog. You can find my books. You can get a free downloadable calendar. All you have to do is click on the tab and click on the link for the PDF and download and print. You can find it all on my website, dreamerliteraryproductions.com.
Awesome. And all of that will definitely be linked below. Make sure you go check that out. And especially if you are interested in the paleo anthropology aspect. But even if you're not, it sounds like a story that really anybody can follow, and anybody can relate to these characters. So I want to thank you so much for your time. Thank you for coming on the platform.
Well, thank you so much for having me. It's
You
fun
are
speaking with you.
You are very welcome, and you have a fantastic day.
You too. Thank you again.
Take care.
You too. Bye-bye.
All right. So sorry I was fiddling new boom arm here with the microphone. Still trying to figure out the best place for it. I was trying to get it up here and then have the mic come down, which I still might do. Work in progress. But about the dreamer. So as we deduced from the back of the book, we actually were on target for once. Usually the back of the book leads us astray, but it actually gave us a lot more information, a lot more accurate information than we are used to. So that's really cool. I'm I I would I'm interested. I'm still interested to see what that balance looks like, because if I was going to read this story, I would want I would be interested in how the setting does affect this. Let's put it this way. If there was a character who had a dream and about, hunting or an animal accident, and their father was on a hunting trip, and it was set in present day, that I have a better idea of what that might look like, as I was alluding to with watching TV. If something's set in the present day, there's a lot less that has to be done in terms of just explaining the setting and what's going on, because we already know. I'm already living in the present. And the choice to have Triss, the main character who's living in that time, be the narrator, I would think that it would be out of, I guess, out of character for him to be explaining certain things to us, because he would have to be talking to people in the future. You know what I mean? Like, and then if he doesn't explain certain things, then how are we to find out about them? So I'm very interested in how that part works. And then maybe it just doesn't really come into play that much at all. And you know, the characters are just people, and it just happens to be that timing, that setting, all of that stuff. Which I think if the story is good, great. But that also begs the question then, why bring all of this stuff that, you know, not a lot of people know about the differences between a Cro-Magnon and a Neanderthal and what was going on 40,000 years ago. Not a lot of people know this stuff. So if they're going to be immersed in a story, there has to be a certain level of understanding of these characters and how these characters live. And if they don't, if there's not, and you know, if they're, again, coming back to that balance, if there's not that balance of, you know, the story itself, as well as creating the world in which the story is happening, then I could see that being a little bit of a weakness. But she's going 7 books strong, so that must not be the case. So that's really what I'm interested in. I think I wish you know, she'd said she's been into this stuff all of her life. And I wish we, you know, not a knock on her, but I wish we could have gotten into a little bit more of the technical aspects of that stuff, especially if it's not part of the book. So that as, you know, if you are going in to read the book, that you would have been able to get that stuff from this conversation. And so it's not a knock on her for not knowing it. Oh my God, this guy over here. It's not a knock on her for not knowing it. But that would have been cool, cool to just to learn going into a story like this. So I think again, I think that's a sign that it probably doesn't matter as much, because if it did, then she would know. So that's probably not really as big of a focus as I am focused on it. Does that make sense? I think that makes sense. You know what I mean? But yeah, cool conversation. I definitely, you know, think there is more to learn about this area in general. And I don't see why, if this piques your interest at all, that this wouldn't be a good entry point, whether the fiction side or the historical side. It seems like you could pick up this book and see if the anthropological historical aspects speak to you. Then that's a sign that, oh, I want to learn more about this. And then if it doesn't, then the story itself would hold up and you know, just be a story. And you can just see like, okay, well, I like this story, but I have no desire to go do research about the science of all this. So what did you think about the concept? What questions do you have? I definitely think that you know, EA Meigs is somebody that is very active supporting the channel and my social media. So if you have questions, I'm sure she will see the comments. Yeah, let her lay some questions on her. Let's find out some more about the Dreamer series, and specifically the beginning. Not that we didn't find out too much, but you know, I didn't want to get too bogged down in the plot of the story after having gone down the road of the setting. Because I think then we just would have gotten into a whole long thing of just like what happens in the story. And I think if you're interested in that, go buy the book. So remember to hit like, subscribe, comment, hit the bell, all of that good stuff. Thank you for tuning into another episode of the I Didn't Read Your Book podcast. We were talking with E.A. Meigs about her book, The Dreamer, The Beginning. Don't forget, we have plenty of stuff coming for IDRYB. If we just had our first, not our first, but one of many IDRYB lives where we are talking about some other stuff that isn't necessarily tied to the book. So if you're more interested in the stuff that I've got going on, the stuff that I have to say, the stuff that I'm interested in, definitely check that out. I also want to give a shout out to myself. And just mention the playlists, some of the playlists that I have on my channel. So some of the playlists are just groupings of, the podcast, clips of the podcast, where I've appeared other places. But there's a couple playlists like the If You Care What I Watch podcast. Excuse me, not podcast. If You Care What I Watch playlist. That is just a playlist of, every day I fill up my my watch later playlist with what I'm going to, from my subscriptions, what I'm watching through the day, and anything that seems somewhat important or relevant or whatever it is. There's a lot of politics stuff in there. There's UFC stuff in there. There's Marvel stuff in there. There is dating stuff in there. There's a lot of good stuff in there. And I used to share it all the time on my Facebook, and just nobody cared. But if you care what I watch, tune into If You Care What I Watch. Another good playlist that is worth a look is I just this year got into cryptocurrency. There's also a conversation that I had on the Inside Crypto podcast, which is another video on the channel, so check that out. But there is a playlist on this channel called Crypto for Noobs. And I knew nothing about cryptocurrency before I got into it. And I knew that a lot of people don't know about it. And so I wanted to document and collect everything from when I was learning, so that if you are hearing about crypto, all this, crypto that, and you don't know where to start, you're not alone. There's a lot of people. It's tough to find that starting point. There's so much to learn, and you think that you need to know it all, and so you don't know where to start. And you don't need to understand every single thing about Bitcoin and cryptocurrency and the blockchain and all that stuff. You don't need that to be a competent investor. And it's not for everyone, but I think it's something that everybody should know about. And so from the very first video that I watched about crypto, every single video that I've watched that has helped me in some way is on that playlist. So take some time, check out the other parts of the channel, and I'm adding more. There's more coming. Like I said, we just did a live last week. We're going to be doing more. I'm actually doing a live right after I'm done editing this episode. So, and different topics, it's not always going to be politics. It's not always going to be this, that. It's going to be different things. But it's all going to have the theme of, basically what we're doing here is letting, finding people who have something to say and getting that information out there. This should be a hub of people who are interested in interesting things. That's it. If you like interesting things, this is the place that you want to be. So check out the other stuff on the channel, check out some of the old videos, and hit that subscribe button, because I've got a lot in store. And again, the more that I can do, or the rate at which I can do it, is directly relevant to how much money I have. So I would love if you could check those support links, whether it's my Bitcoin address, PayPal, Venmo, Cash App. The channel's not monetized yet, so I'm not making any money from these videos. And if I go live, you can't do a super chat or anything like that. So the only way I can get support for this channel is from you directly. And I really, really, really need some help with that. I have somebody who donated something towards. I'm going to be getting another monitor so that when I am doing the live streams, that I have more that I can keep my eye on. Make sure everybody in the chat is being seen, all of that kind of stuff. And I just want to the better I can put all of this together, the better product you will have. So, with that being said, if you would like to support, please follow the links below and give whatever you can. If you cannot, that's perfectly fine. It is absolutely free to hit the like button. It is absolutely free to share this video. And even if you don't want to do that, that's perfectly fine too. You can just sit at home and think about how awesome I am and how great this podcast is. And I will see you next week for the I Didn't Read Your Book podcast. I am Lutch, your host. Remember to follow me at IDRYB Lutch, and I will see you next time.